Well, hey guys, I'm Amy Skinner, and I have with me Jim Masterson, which is very, very exciting for me. Um, Jim, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay. Hi, I'm Jim. And okay, there's more. Anyways, I th so yeah, Jim Masterson. I teach a method of equine body work that I kind of came across when I was grooming hunter jumpers. Um, and I'll go a little bit into it, but I just noticed when therapists were massaging horses or horse chiropractors were working on horses or craniosacral or whatever, that there were subtle little changes in the horse's behavior while they were working on them. Like, if they were doing really light work, like craniosacral or something, I'd notice the horse blink every once in a while. And I could see there was a connection between where their hand was and what the horse was feeling, shifting weight leg to leg when they were relaxing and releasing tension, just little kind of subtle signs. And that got me interested in it. It was the horse's behavior. And also since I was grooming on the hunter jumper circuit, performance is important. So um, I noticed these things and I just started working on horses and taking some things and modifying them to make them softer and to stay underneath the horse's natural bracing response. They guard against, they protect themselves against showing any signs of vulnerability or weakness. I saw that if you stay under that level of bracing, that you can get the horse's nervous system to release tension, and then you can ask for movement in the body. So that I started working on horses on the hunter jumper circuit, and um, eventually, after maybe, I don't know, a few years, some horse owners were interested in it because they saw it was very interactive with the horse. And it's learnable. You don't have to start by knowing all the anatomy. You just have to start by paying attention to what the horse is saying with its what I call responses. And I started teaching it, and then I got pretty busy teaching it, and so I started training instructors. Well, actually, the first thing that happened was other massage therapists would take my weekend course and they wanted to learn more. So I did an advanced 5-day course. And then the massage therapist mainly would say, do you have a certification program? So I made a certification program, which is pretty rigorous. It takes about a year or so. And it just turned into a teaching business. So that's what I do now. But I don't teach a lot now because we have instructors all over teaching it that are really good. Actually, a lot of them are better teachers than I am, which is cool. that I could kind of what do you call it? Duplicate myself with really good people, and then so I kind of just run the business and go to horse expos and things and do some clinics. I like to do collaborative clinics with I do regular ones with Mark Rashid and Dr. Peters every July in Colorado. And that's basically where I am now.
Uh,
And
so one of the things that you were talking about with your body work is staying under the bracing response, and I forget the wording that you just used, but essentially feeling where the horse needs. You're not doing the body work to the horse, you're doing it in collaboration with the horse's nervous system, right?
yeah,
And
right, yeah.
and as you teach clinics with Mark Rashid and Steve Peters, how does that relate to riding?
Um, well, first, I'll just go back when I first started doing it. I recognized that there was part of the horse's nervous system that holds on to tension and part that releases tension. And then later I learned other, like sympathetic, parasympathetic, the sympathetic, certain level of sympathetic activity that the horse always has, that it's, just carrying itself, with this tension. And then the parasympathetic is what's taking over when they release it. But um, when I started doing clinics with Mark Rashid, we were both at the Midwest Horse Fair, Horse Expo in Madison, Wisconsin, and we were both there presenting. I'm thinking, oh, I want to go, I want to meet Mark Rashid, but I'm kind of nervous,
Hmm.
and then so I said, okay, tomorrow morning, Saturday morning, I'm going to go over and meet Mark Rashid. So we met up, and Mark and Chrissy were what they liked about this method of body work is that when if you're doing it and it's not working, you need to go lighter,
Yeah.
because if you're if the horse is still guarding it, you don't go harder, you go lighter and go softer. And then so that's what caught Chrissy, Mark's wife's eye. Oh, this less is more thing. That's what is kind of part of what it's fundamental to our way of working with horses. So we met, and then Chrissy suggested we do clinics together. So when Mark, and another thing that impressed me about Mark is he said when he would do clinics, he developed a pretty good eye. He used to work with a chiropractor, would come to a lot of his clinics, who's retired and lives in England now. But Mark said when somebody would bring a horse into the clinic, for a lesson, and he said he noticed that there was something not right about the horse's movement, and he wouldn't train, he wouldn't give a lesson unless the horse was what he considered sound. And so he said he was turning away like 30 or 40% of his clients because he wouldn't train through the horse's issues. And that's what got me, because I noticed that a lot of times a horse will have an issue, say it can't pick up one canter lead. And so if it can pick up one and can't pick up the other, and you can't train it to pick up the other easily, then there's a physical component to that problem. And so a lot of trainers will just train through it. No, we're going to get that. We're going to get that left canter lead. We're going to get that right canter lead. And they'll train through it. And so Mark wouldn't train through those kind of issues. And it wasn't necessarily always canter leads. It was just he could see that the horse was either physically uncomfortable, it was painful for the horse to do it, or it just couldn't do it. And so there's either pain causing that, or there's just restriction. So if a horse has an issue over a long period of time, say it has even a more longer period of time, say it has a coffin joint issue, and so it can eventually, you can train the horse to deal with the pain, and then it becomes a restriction where it's physically, mechanically not able to move. So we decided to do clinics together, and the way it works is we'll have the rider come in on the horse and just talk about what the rider wants to work on, and then we'll watch the horse go, and Mark and I will just talk about what we're seeing. We're not saying, oh, the horse is lame here, or horse is lame there, or we're not accusing the owner of doing mistreating their horse. So, but we just watch the horse go, and we talk about what we're seeing, with the people, the auditors. And then if the horse looks good, then Mark will give it a lesson. And well, it's kind of an evaluation lesson. And then later in the day, I'll work on that horse. And then the next day or the third day, the horse will come back in again. So there's a body work part of it, and then there's the training part of it. And that's what we do. It's pretty
So,
cool.
but
I've learned a lot doing it.
yeah, I'm
Uh,
sure. Does the writing philosophy match the bodywork philosophy? So like staying under threshold as a
um,
rider and trying to incorporate the horse's nervous system, I'm sure is, if you're
well,
training
yeah.
bodywork.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what got Mark and Dr. Peters together, is uh working with the horse's nervous system and staying under that threshold. And also I think Steve said when he was reading Mark's books that there were some things that Mark said where he said that Steve said, oh, this is what's going on with the nervous system. So he's working with the nervous system rather than against it, I guess. So that's how those clinics work. And then when Mark was doing clinics with Dr. Peters, and they said, well, why don't we do a clinic with all three of us? And because Dr. Peters, he's coming from the point of view of what's going on with the horse's brain and nervous system during training, and what's going on with during training. And it's the same nervous system when you're doing whether you're doing body work or training.
Hmm.
So it's kind of cool when we do these together, because Dr. Peters is still, he was, when we introduced the body work part, Dr. Peters is going, he wasn't quite, you
Hmm.
know, sure. So I would ask him, what's going on now? And the horse drops his head and just starts yawning, and then it, starts shifting weight from leg to leg. It's obviously relaxed. And I used to call it an endorphin release. And he said, no, it's not an endorphin release. This is kind of a really neat distinction. It's not an endorphin release. When the horse releases endorphin, you're already into the stress zone, you know. And so you want to stay under that stress zone. And so I said, well, what's releasing? What's neurochemically is going on? And he's, well, it's endogenous opioids, and it's probably this and it's probably that. So he was just kind of having to think a little bit in a different lane. in the body work lane. So um, that it's cool because it's always a learning experience for me when doing those clinics, learning from Mark and now learning from Dr. Peters and so I've been doing some research on AI on what's going on, and then I'm gonna, you know, call Steve and run it by him and say, because I want to when people ask what's going on, I want to know the language and I want to know what's going on. You know, I want to be accurate.
I
So
love that idea of collaboration because, the whole blind man and the elephant thing, the blind man and the elephant, how we all look at the elephant through our own lens, like a farrier thinks everything is a hoof problem and a body worker thinks everything is a body issue and a
yeah.
scientist is going to look at
Mhm.
everything from so if we can pool all of our facets together, we can maybe see the whole elephant.
Yeah, yeah. And it's a process, right?
Mhm.
Because every horse is different and the way every horse's history is different. So I've learned, like you just said, I used to look at everything from a bodywork issue. It was a bodywork issue, but it isn't. Sometimes it's the horse has it's a it's a some experience the horse has had. You know, uh, my brain's not. I rushed into the office this morning. My brain's still not working. But you know what I mean. It could be not a physical issue. It can be an emotional issue,
Yeah.
something in its past or in its trainings or its past experience.
Well, so here's an interesting question for you that I think probably a lot of body workers struggle with is like, let's say you're going to touch the horse's poll and the
Mhm.
horse throws his head up.
Yeah.
How does the body worker know if the horse is having pain in the poll and you've reached above threshold, or that is
Mhm.
a trained response due to the way the horse has been handled or has experience?
Yeah. So for me, that's a good one because head shyness for me, and it's just my experience. 95% of the horses I work on that are head shy, that there's something physical under it, but it can be a training issue. And the way for me to tell the difference is if you can train the horse to stop doing it easily, then it's probably a training issue.
Mm.
But when you get in there, when you first touch the pole, like, and you first touch the pole and the horse goes away, if you back off and then you gently get the horse to relax, because obviously you can get the horse to put his head down or else you're never going to get the bridle on, right? So you get the horse to relax, and when you start asking for the movement in there and then they brace right away, then it's probably physical issue. And if you keep working on the horse, you'll realize that, wow, he's really tight right here, and every time you ask it to move between the pole and the atlas, they pull away. It's a pain reaction. So
A really good body worker has to have a really good feel for, when to hang in there and experiment and when
yeah,
to leave.
yeah, yeah. Oh, and the more horses you work on, the more you start to recognize that threshold, where they react in the movement. And does that make sense?
Mhm.
Because if you're moving a joint or a joint through a range of motion in a relaxed state, you can find where the pain point is in that movement.
Yeah.
But if you're just pushing, then the horse is going to be moving. He's bracing and moving,
Yeah.
but he's not. He's just covering it up.
I mean, I know
So
some uh, body workers and trainers will kind of have like a little bit of a conflict because sometimes a body worker will be like, oh, she doesn't like me on her right side and she won't let me touch this or that. And the trainer will be like, I can get over there and touch that. And so
yeah.
you, from an outsider perspective, have to figure out, is the trainer forcing their way through something, or is the
Mhm.
body worker being like a creepy mouth breather that's too tentative?
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
Too nice, or something, or
exactly.
too or too oversensitive or overreacting to the horses.
Yeah,
Yeah.
backing
Mhm.
off at I just joke I
Mhm.
have a friend who was learning body work and I called her a creepy mouth breather because every time the horse would have any response, she would back off and be like, I'm over threshold.
Yeah.
And the horses actually got scared of her after a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's it. That's what happens is for me anyways, just when you approach the horse too carefully, then the horse is going to be like this, like, what's wrong?
Yeah.
Right. And if you just approach the horse kind of naturally, and the horse stays a little more relaxed. So yeah, it is. And everybody's different. All the body workers are different. And some are super soft and super careful and they don't want to,
Yeah.
They don't want to cross the threshold, and um and others are it's probably their modality just is more, more using more pressure, which works. To me, any modality, all of them are helpful. And a lot of times you want to just kind of, you know, sometimes you want to get in and massage a muscle with, because it's really hard. And sometimes you want to do lighter stuff and let the horse's nervous system release it. So, but I guess the more practice you get, the more horses you work on, you start to notice where that is. So, but I'm still learning, sometimes I'll work on a horse and just do too much. And I
Yeah.
can, in the pole and atlas and then just do too much even in 5 minutes. And then the horse is, the horse is super sensitive over it because you've uncovered something, or the rider will get on, and the horse will be, uh, it will not be sound after you work on it sometimes, if you do too much, especially.
Mm.
And so you got to learn, hey, you got to give the horse a you got to respect the horse's need to
Mm.
protect itself, you know.
That's a really good topic of conversation because I've done rehabs for a while. It's been my main area of focus, and I've learned the hard way that sometimes going in and trying to release tension and relieve soreness and relieve all this stuff that sounds really good can sort of destabilize the horse's protective mechanisms, and all of a sudden the horse is just crashing.
Yep.
Um,
Mhm.
so that's always a little bit of a process, I'm sure, to figure out when
It
it's
is.
inappropriate.
Yeah, it is a lot of it. Sometimes it's guesswork, right? Because
Yeah.
you don't know. Maybe your intuition kicks in and says, "Hey, stop here," and you guys respect that. Instead
Yeah.
of using our brain and just keep going. No, and that mentality of, yeah, I can fix this.
Mhm.
And when I first started doing this, I told myself I'm not going to be one of those guys that, those old horse chiropractors. Yeah, I know what that is. I can fix that.
Yeah.
And I wasn't going to do that. So, a lot of times, I just stop, or I'll say, I just don't want to go any farther. And the owner they always respect that if you say I don't want to do more.
When you
But I
take
won't
the
try
attitude
to.
that
Oh,
you're coming in to fix something, you're already like antagonistic to the horse's body. You're
right.
already treating it like it's wrong, and it's really
Mhm.
easy to attack or overdo too much.
Yeah, you can't go in with that attitude. You gotta go in with the attitude of, okay, let's see what the horse has to say.
Yeah.
And then, but you're right. I think the horses pick up on your intention. And so if you go in with a mindset that, yeah, I can fix, I know what it is, I can fix it, then I think horses pick up on that, and then they're already guarding against it before you even started,
Yeah. That's
when
the
they pick up that vibe.
trap of knowledge and practice, right? As you start to learn and become a little bit more competent, and then suddenly you get to where your knowledge supersedes what you're actually observing.
Mhm. Yep. And
Yeah.
then you get humbled when the owner calls the next day and says, "Well, you always say don't. The horse needs a day or two off," or they'll call after 3 days and they'll say, "My horse is lame."
Yeah.
Uh-oh. And everybody gets that call. I tell the people we train, you're gonna get that call at some point. The owner, and it's not a good feeling. But I've learned that I've learned to answer, unless you've way overdone it, which I've learned to say the horse needs another day. And if the horse isn't right the next day, the horse needs another day. The horse isn't right the next day, the horse needs another day. Horse could take 4 days for its nervous system to process
Mm.
big changes. And after the fifth day, then I'll worry, or the fourth day, I'll worry. But I've learned, just give it another day, give it another day, give it another day. And then after that, go back.
Probably
Um,
a good life lesson in there.
yeah. Yeah, I had um, a client in California, and her owner had 20 horses, and she had 20 horses in the owner's barn. And they were really, high level horses, expensive horses, and I would work on them 2 or 3 times a year. And the one time I worked on the trainer's mare, her Grand Prix mare, and she was a really beautiful, small little warm blood. And she was really, really, she wouldn't bend to the right. So I just kept working. I'm going to fix this, and I'm going to fix this. And then um, I came back here no, I didn't. I was in California. It was up in Northern California. I went to Southern California, where I'm originally from, and was visiting my mom, and I got the call. She's not bending to the right, and I said, "Oh man." I'll fly back up there and fix it because she's an important client. And she says, no, 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 like it's okay. We'll just wait and see. And I said, you're going down to uh, Del Mar for a show down there next weekend. And she said, yeah. And I said, I'll meet you there. So I went back down, and the mayor was like, I just did way too much. And she's like this. So I just did some really light work, just enough like the bladder meridian and a tiny wiggle, just so her nervous system would let go,
Mm.
you know, just so it would let go. And then I didn't hear back from her. So I thought, oh, I wonder if I screwed that one up. And then I saw her a few months later, and I said, oh, what about what's her name? How'd she do it? She said, oh, she did great. It was in the Grand Prix class that weekend. So I just overdid it. She said she moved the best she ever moved, but I overdid it, and that's what happened. So big lesson. I mean, that was a huge
Yeah.
lesson for me.
I
Just
mean, it
don't
sounds
overdo
like
it.
there's a lot of pieces to being really good at body work because the pressure of having an important client and a horse who's performing at high level is really
Yeah.
easy to want to throw the book at, I imagine.
Do less. It's
Yeah.
always just I'm learning, and it's a like constant lesson. You got to listen to it. Do less.
Yeah.
If there's any question, just do less, and you're probably doing more than you think you're doing. So,
When I did rehabs full time, I would have horses that were high performing show horses that would have an injury that I would have to rehab. And then I would have a donation rescue that I'd be working on for free. It would just be, and I would always do a much better job on the rescue than a big
yeah,
pro bono because there was,
yeah,
and I don't mean to make it sound like that horse had no value. It's just that there wasn't some monetary value being held over my head, of like this
mhm,
horse is worth hundreds of thousands and it better be performing by such and such a time that
yeah,
the rescue could come in with like a leg half off and I'd feel perfectly competent at
yeah,
getting that horse. There's just
yeah,
everybody says they don't have ego or they don't want to have ego, but it is almost impossible to catch sometimes that I don't want to be the trainer that crippled the show horse. I want to have done
right,
a really good job, and I have to really fight that out of my head that a horse is a horse is a horse. They
yeah.
they all are equal, and I have to really listen to what this horse needs, not what the owner wants or how I want to appear in the situation.
Yeah, it's exactly right. We can't, that's part of who we are, the ego, right? We
Yeah.
can't easily dismiss our ego and say, oh,
Yeah.
go wait over there. You gotta or you can't be really conscious of it and constantly tell
Or it's
yourself,
like
okay,
when people say
that,
they have no ego, I'm like, well, that would be your ego saying that. So
yeah, I know. Yeah, that's your ego saying that.
exactly. Yeah. I
Yeah,
have
it helped.
no ego.
Yeah. I yeah. I'm the humblest person I know.
Yeah. Yeah, there's an article I wrote one time about how hard it was for me to learn to ride from my seat and stop needing my hands. And my teacher had me riding on this horse that was, I mean, he would root the reins from my hands and bolt. And my teacher was like, let go of the reins, let go of the reins. And all I wanted to do was hold him, just take the reins and stop him. And she wouldn't let me, right? So I was being exposed for how handsy I really wanted to be. So I wrote an article about this, and one of the comments on this article was, I have always rode from my butt. And so whenever I feel a little bit uppity, I always think I have always rode from my butt.
Yeah. It's funny because, if you add a little humor into things, it helps your ego let
Exactly.
go.
Exactly.
If you add a little
That's
humor
perfect.
in, then it's not so hard to admit that you were wrong or something. You can
Exactly.
just, you know, have a little fun with it. So yeah, for me, that's like the operating system is having fun with stuff with all of it. Then your ego lets go a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's hard, like you said, if you have a really important client and a really important horse, to make jokes while you're working on it, if they're there. But for me, it helps break the ice, and then you can relax a little bit about it.
Well, let them know you've always rode from your butt and you'll be good.
Yeah. Well, I'm still in the riding from my hands stage. I'm not that good of a rider, so.
Yeah, unfortunately, so am I. That's what I always let my students know when they get super upset. And I'm like, I still get yelled at by my teacher for stupid stuff.
Oh, yeah. Constant learning process.
For sure.
Uh,
So
So okay, we haven't heard about how you got started or your story. And of
training.
course you yeah, yeah, well of course, you just finished your book Stumbling with Grace. So that, you can I've gathered a little bit about your
Well, was one of those horse crazy kids, and my family didn't have horses, so I was like the kind of person that was looking at horses on the side of the road, going horsey, 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 and so I would beg for riding lessons. My dad was in the Air Force, and when I was 6, we were stationed in Venezuela, and so I got riding lessons at the military riding school, which was like, there was a lot of Germans in Venezuela, so we don't need to
Oh,
like
okay.
hypothesize why. You can probably imagine why.
Okay. Yeah.
But I had a German riding instructor when I was little, and she was very, very intense. The whole tight bun, the whip, the breeches, the whole nine
Mhm.
yards. And then I learned to ride from that like very, very intense military style.
Yeah.
Um, and then when I got to be in just out of high school, I wanted to ride again, so I just did trading, cleaning stalls and stuff for lessons. And then eventually, what would happen is like one of the school horses would have bucked a kid off, or bolted with a kid, or wouldn't go, or whatever, and they would have me clock out and get on this horse and ride it. And the reasoning wasn't my talent; it was my uh, replaceability as a young person, right? Like you're a
Okay.
renewable resource when you're that
Hmm.
young. So just clock out and hop on.
Yeah.
And
Put down the pitchfork and go ride this horse we're having trouble with. But
exactly. Exactly. And I would stick on pretty well at that age. And so they eventually had me ride more horses and more horses. And then I just kind of dabbled in teaching lessons and stuff. And at a certain point, I realized I didn't know what I was doing. And I had no formal education on problem solving, because it seemed like that was 100% of my work was problem solving, because I was riding school horses that were doing naughty things, or
yeah.
whatever. So then I just started going to clinics and doing internships and stuff like that. And then half of those horses, as you mentioned with Mark Rashid, ended up being lame. And so instead of doing training, I started to refine that into rehab, because a lot of the times the horses that were bucking were in pain, or they weren't picking up their canter lead because something was crooked or something was wrong. And so that's where I devoted my focus, is figuring out how to get these horses' bodies into better shape so they could do what they
Mhm.
wanted to. And a lot of it's funny because people think of like having a clinic circuit as being somebody special and somebody famous and amazing, but really most of it was driven by just needing to get a sum of money for a truck bill
Yeah.
as quickly as possible. You get a group of people
Yeah.
together, and then a vet bill comes up, and you got to get another group. Want to say hi? Hi. This is Miles.
Hi.
This is Jim. Hi.
Hi. Did you say Miles?
Yeah,
Oh, hi, Miles.
Mr. Not Napping.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's kind of how I got started, and now
Mhm.
I teach writing and problem solving from a rehab perspective.
Oh, that's good. I mean, it's like body work is can't fix everything. Sometimes, I mean, a lot of the way the horse is being ridden will release tension in the body.
Mm.
The way you're asking it to move is gonna let it move,
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, it's like getting the horse into the best balance for their body in that time, and then doing range of motion exercises, seeing if we can get tensions to release through engaging weak areas, getting I mean it's really like I have a classical training background, like classical dressage training background, but I try to apply it to reality, to people of all disciplines and backgrounds and all horses. And people think that that means riding in a top hat, getting the horse on the bit and stuff like that. But really, it's just getting good alignment, good range of motion. Okay, you better go. We have to pee.
oh, okay, better go now.
Yeah, we better go.
Um, yeah, like I think like I'm not trained in that, but it seems to me like the classical horsemanship and like the training pyramid in dressage, that is like that's the way it should work, but it gets a little distorted or a little bit, in when competition, you
Yeah.
get into the world of competition, it just, they'll take one part and then, oh, this is what we're going to focus on. But if you start from the bottom and work your way up and keep all of the training pyramid, that's classical riding. It's
Yeah.
in from dressage, from my point of view, my limited knowledge of it.
A lot of dressage, even really good dressage, focuses on like the horse is already fine, and then you're going to build them up. Um,
Mhm.
and a lot of the texts speak to that, like developing upward. And then there's maybe a little quick anecdote about like what to do if your horse refuses the lead or whatever. But um, I was really lucky in that I had a teacher who had studied with von Neindorf for a long time, and she was a longtime student of Walter Zettel's. And she just, I don't know if she had her own unique brilliance or if they taught her that
Yeah.
because she was exceptional at, she would look at one horse who was having trouble and she would say, like, his walk is not diagonalized. So we're going to do these things to diagonalize the walk before you ever trot and canter. And then the next horse, she'd be like, he needs to canter a lot. And I'd be like, how
Oh,
do you know that?
yeah.
How
You just told me not to canter that last horse.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'd get into one lesson and she'd be like, slow it down. What are you doing? And so I'd slow everything
Yeah.
way, way down. And the next horse she'd be like, whoa, you're boring me to tears. We better move, right? And I'd be like, how do you know that? But she was so good at finding the root problem of the movement, as well as figuring out what the horse's mind needed. Like if the horse was energetic, then we had to move. So we would work on
Yeah.
canter transitions to let the horse feel relaxed in movement, but the other one would get, stumbly and nervous. And so we'd have to slow it down and
Mhm.
let him practice footwork.
Yeah. And she probably could see that like in the first 3 seconds of
Yeah.
watching the horse move.
Watching me walk up to the barn, she'd be like,
Yeah.
don't even tell me what you want to do. I don't care. We're doing
Yeah.
this.
So you were obviously able to pick up on some of that, you know?
Yeah, I rode with her for 12 years until she started having
Oh.
some health issues. So, and it
Mhm.
was like all day long. I'd ride every horse in the barn with her all day, for
Wow.
12 years. So I spent a lot of time with her and picked up as much as I possibly could. So I was very, very lucky to have her.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's helpful. And then from the rehab point of view too. So
Yeah,
that blending everything you learn as you're working on horses, and it starts to come together, but then all of a sudden something else shows up you didn't learn. Like,
yeah, yeah,
so,
yeah, and just getting your hands on a lot of different horses and letting them humble you, experimenting. Um,
yeah.
and one of the best learning things for me was doing a lot of pro bono stuff where I didn't have any skin in the game. Nobody was going to
Yeah.
yell at me if I couldn't do it. That gave me a lot
Hmm.
of confidence. So
Yeah.
I did a lot of rescues. I did a lot of friends' horses. I did a lot of like, just let me try that for a video series. And if it doesn't work out, I won't post it, that kind of thing.
Yeah. 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 And like you said, you don't have that pressure of being right. you know
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, there's no film crew out. Like today we're going to show Amy doing XYZ thing because I
Mhm.
had no idea. It was just me and a pivo and a horse, and I didn't know if it was going to work at all.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I tried the Pivo for a while and it worked really well, but then somebody would walk between me and the Pivo and it would follow them. And, and I was like, yeah, the Pivo, you're on your own, right? You're doing it yourself. So
So
it
I had a
doesn't.
video I was trying to film for my library on one of my horses, and I had my son on the perimeter of the fence, and I told him not to come in. But he figured out that this camera would tilt toward him whenever he'd run by. And so, I'm focused, I'm riding, I'm doing my thing.
Yeah.
I watched the video back, and there's my son chasing the pivo back and forth and like taunting it away from me. So
Yeah.
I got no video, just a little
Oh, yeah.
3-year-old running around.
Yeah. Oh, well, back to the learning and the horses part. It is amazing. You think one thing I noticed when I started teaching is you learn a lot when you teach, right?
Yeah.
Once you realize, well, you realize how much you always realize, hopefully, how much you don't know. But when I first started teaching, I started reading, wow, I know more than I thought I knew. So just teaching, every time you teach, you pick up a little bit more. So that's helpful. But
Yeah.
it's a constant learning process. Um,
For me, teaching was really interesting because in my learning process, when your teacher's telling you to do or not do something, I always joke everybody thinks they're doing something that they're not. Like I'm not leaning left and then you're like falling off the left
Mhm.
side. But when you teach other people, you see the things that you do and somebody else and see exactly why they don't work or why
Yeah.
they do work or you for me it was really helpful to see that pretty much everybody's body had the same issues. And so it wasn't
Uh-huh.
unique to me. Like I'm not the worst rider in the whole world. Everybody
Yeah.
does funky stuff with the one leg. Everybody
Mhm.
has a hand that floats away. Everybody
Mhm.
thinks they're straight when they're like over here. And
Mhm.
so it wasn't so personal for me
Yeah.
anymore. It was just like this is what bodies do when they're nervous. Nervous riders do
Mhm.
this.
Yeah.
Overconfident people do this. People who talk a lot do this. It's just a,
Mhm.
a physical response to a mental state. And
Mhm.
I got to see a lot of people doing a lot of different things and start to put together like patterns of
Yeah.
bodies.
Yeah. Yeah. I know exactly what you mean. Sometimes teaching, I'll say, soften your right hand just a little bit. I am softened.
Yeah.
Shut up. Or another one, stop wiggling that hand, and say, I'm not wiggling that hand. It's that one. Stop wiggling it.
Yeah, I love I had a student who I would be like, you're leaning to the left, get back to the center. And she'd be like, that's just the way I ride.
Yeah, okay. Okay, keep doing that then. Um, yeah, it is. Oh yeah, that's the hardest part. And I realized that people, working with horses wasn't very complicated, but
Yeah.
how different people are in the way they learn and the way they are, just the
Yeah.
way they are. And then trying to adjust to that when you're teaching somebody like that's different.
And trying to
Um,
stay under their brace response too, because some people
um,
you find it way too fast without even realizing.
yeah,
I
yeah,
can't tell you how many people have come back to me and be like, I've never been so offended. I cried all the way home. And I'm like, I have no
uh,
idea what I could have said. I
uh-huh,
think I said something really nice. Actually
yeah,
one of my students came back to me years later and she was like, you shredded me apart. And I was like,
mhm,
wow, I don't remember that. I'm so sorry. What did I say? And she was
mhm,
like, well, you told me my horse's top line was weak here and there. And, I'd
yeah,
been working really, really hard on it. And so, there's a much more personal component of like, I thought I was helping her and she took it as criticism for the work that she's
yeah,
doing. So,
yeah. And I've always thought I was really good at staying under the brace or under that threshold of
yeah,
which is a brace. And sometimes they take it as criticism, but
exactly.
I thought I was pretty good at that. But then the same thing would happen. Either teaching a person uh, teaching a person, finding out where their threshold is, and you realize, the threshold was lower than you thought,
Yeah.
or working on the horse, like, I would be working on a horse, and the owner would maybe come by or be there. When I was doing it on the show horses, often owners weren't even there. It was just the trainer gives you a list of horses to work on. But if the owner would walk by and say, "How's my horse?" and I said, "Oh, he's a little sore in the glutes here," and they would panic like, "Oh no, he's sore in the glutes." And I said, "Well, yeah, he should be sore in the glutes. He's a jumper." So, but they would panic or worry that they were abusing their horse or something. But
Yeah.
learn to say, I learned how to say it differently so that they wouldn't panic. But sometimes they'd still panic.
Yeah, I've
Um,
learned the hard way that
mhm,
sometimes when you think you're giving a delivery of solutions,
mhm,
sometimes people take it as a critique of all the things you've ruined your horse with.
mhm.
Here's all
Yeah,
the ways in which your horse is dying, you know?
yeah. Well, sometimes that's it's a breakthrough for a student, to
Yeah.
get to experience that,
Yeah.
hopefully.
And so, yeah, sometimes we want to protect their feelings, but like you just said, sometimes they might need, not that you ever want to intentionally hurt anybody, but sometimes that feeling is a call to action for them. And,
Mhm.
it's hard to know
Yeah.
as a teacher, when do you protect somebody's feelings? When do you let them have their feelings? When do you, get involved? Like
Yeah.
what is our role as they grow? How much of it is mine to even take on?
Hmm. Yeah.
All tough.
Well, yeah. The horses are the easier part of that
Yeah.
doing of this. So, yeah. So anyways, back to your background, your dad was my dad was in the Air Force too.
Oh, really?
Um, yeah.
Cool.
So, and so you were in Venezuela. You lived a long time in Venezuela.
I lived
And,
for 3 years in Venezuela and then maybe 7 years in Colombia after that.
oh, okay. What did he do? What did your dad do?
My dad flew F-16s for a good while, and then
Mhm.
after a while, he flew C-130s. And
Mhm.
then when we were in Colombia, he was part of the whole Plan Colombia thing, which was like training
Mhm.
the Colombian Air Force to take over their cartel problem. There's a huge problem with coca down there.
Mhm.
Um, and then, I think I hope I'm correct, but I think since then they've eliminated the FARC. They had this huge, huge problem with guerrilla groups. One of them was called the FARC. They were
Uh-huh.
responsible for tons and tons of, kidnappings, bombings. That was
Yeah.
what my dad was
Yeah,
working.
yeah, yeah, I remember. Yeah, I remember that there was a period where you didn't want to go to Colombia,
Yeah,
because you'd be kidnapped and
yeah, that's
ransomed
when
or
I was
whatever.
there.
Yeah, yeah, I was gonna say, but you were able to ride through all that the whole time you were there, then obviously.
A little bit here and there, yeah. So,
Yeah.
occasionally I would get to like a country club in Colombia is where you would ride.
Mhm.
And most of the horses that I saw would be cart horses that would have been donated once they'd be retired, and they would be used to like pull recycling or garbage through the street. So, I saw horses every day, but I didn't get to ride as often when I was in Colombia.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah, so it's interesting because you were in your book, there's little references to that. And so I was
Yeah.
thinking, oh, you're an expat kid. Because at some point, like I was saying later, in when the internet got going, I was able to hook up with friends from school from that I went to school with we lived in Mallorca for a couple of years
Okay.
in Spain, and there was an American International, a small, really small school there that I went to, and you make really good friends in high school, and then um, when the internet, then you lose track of them,
Yeah.
when you're overseas, and then the internet started, and I was able to start reconnecting with them and hearing their stories, and then going and visiting with them, and then I realized there's an expat kid thing, where
Yeah.
when you come back to the States, you're away at a young age, and then you come back to the States, you really don't feel like you fit in,
Yeah.
almost no matter who you are. So I found that interesting.
Yeah, I
uh,
remember I moved back to the States. I moved to Arizona from Venezuela in third or fourth grade, third grade maybe. And I remember the first day of school back in the States, there was the standing for the Pledge of Allegiance, and I didn't know what that was. Like
oh,
everybody standing and putting their hand over the heart and reciting something, and
yeah.
what is this thing I'm supposed to know? And I was also really tan. And so all of my kids in school thought we were a Mexican family that had moved in on the street, and they were like the weirdos who don't know the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah.
And it took a long time to get assimilated, which is so funny because, obviously I'm American, but um, and then when I moved back to the States after graduating high school in Columbia, it was the same thing. I'm like, this is just, I had culture shock really bad. It was
Well,
weird.
you were away a long, yeah, you were away a long time.
Yeah.
When we moved to the Philippines for a year when I was 11,
Okay.
and there on the my dad wasn't in, he was out of the Air Force then. He was in the Air Force when I was born, and then he left the Air Force, and he just was a contract pilot. So
Okay.
in the Philippines, it was 1966, so it's during the Vietnam War, and so we lived in outside of Clark Air Base, and and he was flying big cargo planes, Super Constellations, which is a beautiful airplane, if you know airplanes, and so he worked for a company called Flying Tiger Air Service, and so they contracted with the government to fly in Southeast Asia. But we lived next to Clark Air Base, and they had a riding stable on Clark Air Base, and so I would um, I would get a ride out to the riding stable, and every once in a while uh, rent a horse to ride, and then I wanted a horse, and so my parents bought me a little. It looked like a Welsh pony, but it was a Kalesa pony, a cart pony. It pulled carts originally, but now it was owned by somebody on the base, and
Okay.
so I had that. We lived there for a year, and so I had that pony. That was my first horse. But
Neat.
yeah, that was fun. But it was fun living off the base too, because living in, if you're living on base, you're living in America,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
If you're off base, you're living in the country that you're in. And so we were there for a year, and then later, 1969, we moved to Spain because my dad got a job flying in Africa, but there was a war going on. It was Biafra. I don't know if you remember the Biafra Civil War in Nigeria. So we lived in Mallorca, which is a beautiful place to live, for a year. And then that job was over. And so he got another job in the Congo, and we were able to move there. So we lived there for 2 years.
Very,
So, I was a couple of years in each place. And then we moved back to Spain for a year. And then I graduated high school in Spain and came back to the States. But so it was kind of intermittent. We never were in one place for very long.
yeah.
Uh, but I mean, it was a fun way to grow up, and I there were eight kids in my family, so
I've
a
got
lot of the huh?
You're
What?
seven.
Oh, okay. So I mean, so we had our own little community, moving around, and so it was fun. It was a really good way to grow up. And when we were in the Congo, where there was no school, so
Freedom.
I spent my
Yeah.
yeah, freedom. Got to fly around with my dad in C-47s, and
Wow.
my two little brothers and I would travel. We'd hop on a truck, on the back of a truck, and go to another town. We'd be gone for like a week or two. My parents, they were great. I mean, they were fine with it. They never worried about stuff, my parents, which is really cool. And so they let my two little brothers and I was 16 and Tony was 15 and Danny was 13, hop on the back of a big kind of a freight truck and go off to the other, in the eastern part of the country. And we usually would go to places my dad would reply regularly. So we'd stay with the station manager there for a day or two. And my dad would show up in the DC-3 and we'd fly home. So a lot of freedom. Not going to school for 2 years was really, really cool. And then I
I
just made
bet.
it up. Yeah, made it up when I got back. We got back to Mallorca and went to the same school. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah,
And where are you and your family? Um,
I'm in the middle.
Me too.
Oh, okay.
Overlooked middle child. That's why I need all this attention now.
I wasn't overlooked because I was I was the oldest of the second litter. So
Oh,
there was
okay.
I had four older brothers. My mother, during the Second World War, she got married. She had four kids, like they're four boys, pretty quick. And then, they were divorced. She and her husband were divorced. And then later, she met my dad and married him. This is
Okay.
just uh, right after the Korean War. So, and then they had four more. So I'm the oldest of the second litter. So I wasn't overlooked. I feel
Okay.
I feel like I might have been a little spoiled. I got a little more attention
Okay.
than my two little brothers. So and then the last one is a girl, Mindy. She was born, and then she got all the attention.
Okay. I have a youngest sister, and then I think it's 7 years between her. 7 years after that, they had another youngest baby. So we have two competing youngest babies.
Uh, okay.
They've been competing for attention
Oh, really?
since forever.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. Super
Well,
fun.
I'll show you. I can show you a picture of my dad. When he was in the Air Force. I'm
Yeah,
gonna
I'd
take
love to
this
see
move
it.
up here. So let me move this Connie. So this is like, you have family photo wall. A lot of people. This is my family photo wall. It's my dad in the middle.
Is
Sorry.
there a chimp to the right? Is that a chimp?
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
and a baboon.
Chiefs.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
my dad's in the middle, but that's in Korea. So
Okay.
yeah, when we lived in the Congo, once the local people knew that I loved animals, they started bringing them to us, and we
Oh,
would buy them. Like, so we bought a chimp. Somebody bought a chimp to us, and
okay.
so she lived with us in the house. She was like, they're almost human, and she was just so attached to my mom.
Okay.
And then they would bring other monkeys to us, and then I would buy them for a couple dollars. And I had two baboons that were really, really, really cool, little
Wow.
baby baboons. And I had a albino monkey, which was really interesting. So I got to
Okay.
plug back my computer here. Um, and they're like little humans. They would First they would run all, live. I tried to keep them. You could tie a rope around their waist and they'd be on a leash, but baboons are escape artists. They'll just untie themselves, each other. And so then they would run around and live in the trees, but they would come in the house, they'd sit on your lap. They were tame, But then when they started coming in the house and stealing stuff, the food and stuff. And so I built this big cage out, and they lived in this huge cage. It was probably like 20 by 20 by 15 feet tall,
Okay.
and then but they would escape from that all the time. So half the time they were out and just living sitting on our lap, and the chimpanzee would wrestle with the dog. It was yeah. So it was a fun it was a fun way to grow up.
I bet. Was that your favorite place you lived?
I think so, yeah. And
Yeah.
Mallorca was pretty cool too.
Yeah.
It was fun as a teenager. But the Congo, I think, was the most fun because of all the animals and the freedom we just had.
That sounds amazing.
But when I did get back to the States, I felt pretty out of place.
Yeah.
I was 19 then.
Yeah, it's not everyone probably had a baboon in their kitchen with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hard to
So
relate.
yeah.
So do you
So
speak Spanish?
I don't speak Spanish very well. I think I probably learned more of my Spanish after I left. That's when I really wanted to start learning. I spoke because there were a lot of expats in Mallorca, and
Okay.
so we didn't have to speak Spanish. But afterward, and they spoke in the Congo, they spoke French. So I learned more French there, and then a local dialect that I couldn't have a conversation in, but I could have a semi conversation in. But I
Okay.
didn't learn I didn't learn Spanish. But after when I got back to the States, I started studying Spanish more and studying French more because I for some reason I was more interested in the places that we lived in.
Yeah.
Um, because I was when you're younger and you're living in a place that's your world, but then when you
Yeah.
leave it, you kind of realize, wow, that was an interesting place. I want to learn more about it.
Yeah.
Um,
I
and then
learned, go ahead.
sorry. Oh, I was gonna just say then, later in at one point I lived in Wyoming. My dad got a job flying there, and it was strange because my parents moved around a lot, in different jobs, and often we between jobs they'd come back to the States and they might live with my two little brothers for a while, but then my dad would get a job somewhere and move there, and we would go there, so the family kind of it was all over the place, but we would meet up and live in these places for a year or two. So I went to Wyoming when my dad got a job there, and we had 5 acres, and so we boarded a couple of horses. So and then in a couple of horses there, and then in Glendora, California, for 2 years, my friend of mine's dad had 360 acres and horses. So at certain points during my life, I hooked back up with horses, but I wasn't with horses for a steady period until I started doing the hunter jumper thing,
And do you feel
working on
like
horses.
since you've moved a lot, do you ever get this like itchiness to go somewhere? Like you have trouble staying in one place?
Yeah, so when I moved here, and when I met my wife here, and in 1990, since 1998, I've been here in Fairfield. But right away, I started grooming the hunter jumpers. It's always on the road, and I was probably gone 3 or 4 months a year. That helped, being in one place to be able to go. So pretty much since then, um, that's been really, if I'm home for a little too long, I get, like you said, a little itchy and want to go somewhere. So
Yeah,
it's
it's so
that,
funny because people always talk about their like hometown and their like family home that they grew up in and stuff. And I've never related to that at all because I've
mhm,
moved, I'm 36. I've probably moved 40 times in my life. I've
yeah,
never stayed anywhere for very long. And even as I grew up as an adult, all I've done is move around still. And,
yeah,
and I've got 2 kids and 6 horses, and it's a little more important to stay still, but the clinic route takes care of
yeah,
some of that for me.
yeah. Well, do you feel like that's your home now? A little bit?
Hopefully, yeah,
Yeah.
hopefully. There's a lot of things still in the process of being set up. Like, I don't have a barn or an arena and that kind of thing, but I
Hmm.
still feel like I could live anywhere. As long as my
Yeah.
family goes and my horses go, I feel like I could live anywhere.
Yeah. 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 I feel like I'm from Southern California originally, but I ended up here in Fairfield. So I enjoy the small town. It's 10,000 people, and we have a nice place right up outside of town. So we're out in the country, but we're a mile from the center of town. And I mean, it's really turned into a nice place over the years. So I
Yeah.
feel like Fairfield is home, but I would never. It's interesting. I came here first because or when when I was 21 or 22, I learned transcendental meditation technique. And then in the 80s, the TM movement, which grew pretty big. I mean, it was a huge movement. They bought a college campus here in this little town in Fairfield, Iowa. So I had friends that came here. So when I left Alaska, no, I left Wyoming, and I was ready to make a change. And a friend of mine was here in Fairfield, and he says, "Come to Fairfield and visit." So I did, and it's really interesting because it's a mix of small town Iowa, which I would probably not be here, live in Iowa otherwise, but mix of small town and this kind of new age community.
That's
And
so
so it's been this way since the 80s. So it makes it a little more interesting place to live. And so I do. So this is what I would call home now, not California, but it's like I call it home, but it's like, it's not always going to be home, but it probably is,
yeah.
when you're used to moving, you think, well, no, this is only temporary. I'm just doing this till something better comes along, but I've been doing it for 25 years. So,
Yeah, yeah, it is interesting. It is a very unique way to grow up because you are very adaptable in a lot of ways. You can roll with the punches in a lot of ways. But then
yeah.
you have other weird neurotic quirks, or at least I do, that
Hmm.
make it a little bit harder to stay on course or, you know,
Hmm.
one of the biggest problems for me for moving so much was problem solving because, if I had a falling out with friends or a teacher hated me, I was going to move
Hmm.
anyway. So I just
Oh, okay.
I just waited out, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then when I had my own business and had kids and was in the same place for a long time, I was like, "Oh, I don't actually know how to do this.
You have to
I don't know how to
face these
resolve
things
these
now.
things." Yeah, because I guess I'm not moving. I have a mortgage
Mhm.
now, you know.
Yeah.
So, so that was
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, I guess it all works out, when it comes to, what you're doing with horses,
Yeah.
all these experiences,
Well, the
they're all
courses
helpful.
taught me how to be humble and be honest, and that was
Mhm.
a hard pill to swallow. That when you're avoiding all your problems or hoping that they just go away, you're not being honest and you're not being
Yeah.
humble. So that was a difficult road for me to cross, but um, the horses really did help me with that. So,
Yeah. Well, and work for me, the working with people too,
hmm
because you're working with the owners,
yeah.
that's what really helps me because I'm a people pleaser, and I didn't know that.
Mm.
So I wouldn't be totally honest with people. So I have trouble being totally honest with people,
Yeah.
when it comes to something difficult,
Yeah.
you know.
Sure.
I try to find the soft way around it. And
Yeah.
so that's what really helps with this method of body work. It helps to be able to find the soft way around the problem, and
Yeah.
then get to the problem. And so with the horse, it's not complicated, but with people, it's more complicated. The finding the soft way around, sometimes you're doing them harm. You're not helping them,
It's
and
such a
then people
delicate
people don't,
dance between
yeah, they don't trust you.
yeah. Delicate dance between being brutally honest for the sake of, telling the truth and
Hmm.
causing damage and, tap dancing around it and not being honest.
Hmm.
It's
Yep, that's
hard.
me.
And every single person requires a different flavor of that
Yeah.
dance. It's hard when you're in this business to know exactly how to hit it with everybody.
Yeah. Well, I have a couple instructors that are like our key instructors that are so good at that.
Mm,
Like Sandy in California, she's so positive, and she can just be direct with you and in a really positive way.
yeah,
It's just like she's amazing that way.
it's
And
great.
then another one in the UK, Vicky, and she's like she can just say something directly to you, and you'll take it as, wow, that's really helpful. And just, yeah, okay, they'll go along with it. And so all of the really, I mean, tricky situations or people that I've had to deal with, with as far as, training people, um, they're I hand them off to them now because they can handle it in two different ways. Like Sandy can just be so inspiring,
Mm.
and Vicky can just be, we're going to do it this way, and this is why we're going to do it this way, and then the person goes along with it. But then, there have been people in the past, sometimes students, that where you just can't get around them. You can't get around it. So I don't know if you've had some students that just don't get it. and they want to do, they already know it, and they don't want to do it your way. They want to do it your they want to do what you're doing, but they don't want to do it your way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah, I get, I'm always as a teacher trying to figure out how do I help this person? I probably think about that way more than I should. And, sometimes probably a therapist could tell me that some of it's probably not my job. I always think that I have to improve my teaching
yeah.
to help this person.
Mhm.
And then sometimes I'll get the people that are like, yeah, I tried that and it didn't work. And I'm like, well, you spent 90% of the time resisting me or expecting it wasn't going to work. So of course it didn't work.
Mhm.
So, you can't do everything for everybody. Sometimes people have to find it their own way.
Yeah, that's true.
Maybe
That's a
it
lesson to,
doesn't
yeah.
resonate with them. Maybe it's not for them.
Yeah, maybe it's not for them.
Or
But
maybe
you want to help them. You
right.
want to help them, so you want to stick with it and stick with it and stick with it. So,
Yeah,
but
sometimes I want to help them so bad that I'll like cram it down their throat. Like I could just fly
okay.
out there and do it for you. Just
Yeah,
let me show you. And
yeah,
that's a lesson for myself too. It's not my responsibility probably to make every single person get it.
yeah, yeah. Because you want to help. That's what you're doing it because you want to help
Yeah.
deep down inside, and you're doing it for yourself too because you want to help the person. But
Yeah.
deciding when you can't help that. That's why it's helpful to have other people that can help you help them.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, maybe somebody else's personality clicks a little bit better or they say things in a better
Oh
way or
yeah, yeah. They say things in a better way. Yeah.
yeah.
And so
It's
what about oh, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say it's all very interesting.
Yeah. And so what about horses? So I mean, fortunately, most people, they want to learn, they're eager to learn. They learn a different way, but they're open to learning. And so it's really cool to be able to help a lot of people learn what you're showing them. Um, but then with horses, sometimes it's a similar thing, but for me, it's a little less complicated
Yeah.
when it's with the horse, you can help them or you can't, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, every once in a while I'll run into a horse that I'll feel frustrated with and I'll feel like and I just can't get through to this horse. I just can't through to this horse and one of two things either happens. The horse is too lame to recover and I need to accept that and I was struggling to accept that. Or my attitude was too intense. I was trying too hard and not accepting either how long it's going to take or what I need to do to fix it or how I need to change myself. And as soon as I accept that, everything is easy peasy.
Okay, okay. And
Like,
what if I'm sorry.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead. I was gonna say, what about when it's not your horse and when it is your horse?
I think it's harder with my own horses. That's what I was going to
Yeah.
say. I have a gelding that for he was an off the track thoroughbred and for the first year that I had him he would toss his head and run backward and spook at everything and I would like I've treated for ulcers. I've been doing all this in handwork. I know that works for every other horse I've worked with. I've been riding him the same way. I'm taking lessons with my teacher and it's just like he's just coming apart at the seams and it's not getting any better. um and then one day I realized that my attitude to solving his problems was too intense. And I have five other horses to ride too. So some of that relieves some of the pressure on this one horse. So, I start riding on my other horses and just say, like, I don't care what he comes out like today. I'm just going to enjoy the process of it. And that horse has changed like night and day. He's not spooky. He's super calm. He's a pleasure to ride. He's a lot of fun. And I think I was just making his little brain pop out of his head with the intensity I was bringing in,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Same. It's the same here. I when I'm teaching people, I say you gotta if you have any agenda, you don't go in with an agenda because the horse is gonna pick up on it,
Yeah.
and then the horse is gonna well just from my point of view, the horse is going to brace against it. But
Mhm.
you can't have any agenda when you go and start in to work on the horse. And when you have your own horse, you have an agenda you have an agenda, and you can't.
Absolutely.
And for me, I can't get around it. You can't get around the agenda. Sometimes you have your with your own horse. So we've gotten a few horses over the years in the well, I had two Morgans that were given to me when they were 3 and 4, and they were perfect, till she died a couple years ago, and Jeremiah's shuffling around the property now like a little old man. We just let him go anywhere he wants. But my wife, we've had different horses over the years for her to ride. She's a hunter jumper rider, but we'd get a horse and then it would have an issue, and I just couldn't. I couldn't break through it, because maybe I was trying to break through it.
Hmm.
And but if it's other horses, horses I've worked on that are showing that are extremely sore and they're like just ready to explode, and I've always been able to do at least something, even a little bit. And but with a couple of the horses that we've got, it's like there's a can't I can't get through my agenda on them.
It's hard.
So
It's really
yeah,
hard, especially when you're in the public and your horses are a representation of you and your skill and your knowledge and your ability. That slippery ego comes back
I
in.
yeah, yeah, I don't talk about those horses. I
Yeah.
only talk about my two perfect horses.
And there's
They've been
times where I'm riding, and now I ride in a public arena too, so I don't have my own
okay.
arena. So I haul my horses out to another arena. People watch me ride. And,
Oh,
and so if something goes wrong, it's harder to focus like it's just me and my horse having a conversation. It's like
mm,
these are prospective clients or people who don't like me. They're
mhm,
all like, "Oh, that's because she sucks," or "Oh, she's so
yeah,
good." You start tuning into other people's thoughts and opinions of you more than your own horse.
yeah,
And it is such a practice of focus to just focus on the horse and
mhm,
not what people are seeing, what they're doing, what they perceive of how well you can ride or can't ride. Why
mhm.
does, because I can even hear people when I'm riding. Why is she doing that? What does she look like? She doesn't
Uh-huh.
sit up straight or she's
And
bouncing or,
yeah, you know how horse people are. That
exactly.
that's the way they are.
I'd never let my horse go that low. I'd always raise my horse that high. I would
Uh,
never move. He should be this by now. All you do is
yeah,
walk. So you have to like, um, you
it's
just have to really stay focused on the
yeah.
horse.
Well, it's a good lesson for you too, and for
Yeah.
me
Yeah.
to it's not that's not that important what they're thinking or saying. At some
Yeah.
point you have to. For me, at some point I have to just to tell myself it's not important what they're thinking or
Yeah.
what they're saying, because it probably isn't.
Yeah.
There's always going to be people that don't agree with the way you're doing something, and I've learned, because
Yeah.
when I first started doing it, everybody loved it. It wasn't everybody loved it, but then you get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then there's people out there that are gonna not love it, and
Yeah.
they're gonna think you're doing something wrong and stuff. So that's been a good lesson to kind of, and it's hard too because I'm a people pleaser. I want people to
Mm.
like what I do, and I want them to be happy, and so it's hard to let go of that. But I kind of, yeah, just have to get used to it.
Yeah, it is hard to accept that, sometimes no matter what you do, people don't like you. And it's really none of my business.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's none of your business. That's what
exactly.
and I've heard that too, and it's helpful. It is none of your business.
Yeah,
What they think is none of your business. It's none of my business what they think. So
exactly. I
if I
don't
can
I
keep,
don't have the right to intrude on other people's thoughts. I'm just out there doing my thing.
yeah, and often if you don't react or respond to that, then uh, that changes. Sometimes people they're looking for a reaction or a response from you.
Yeah.
When you're writing, they're looking to make you wrong and them right, and then they're looking for you to say something about it, and then you don't. So, but yeah, I think probably learn more lessons from people than
Yeah.
from horses. So,
Yeah.
um, um,
It's funny. I mean, I don't think of myself as anything special because I spend all day being bossed around by a 3-year-old and wiping his butt. Like I'm
okay,
his slave. You know what I mean? Like I'm not in this household, I'm
yeah,
not a special person. I'm just
yeah,
liver of snacks, the feeder of horses, shoveler of poop, and wiper of butts. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So it's like out there on internet land isn't even the real world.
Yeah. I probably have a little easier because when you're working on a horse, often you're not in an arena with a lot of people watching.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and that's helpful. So the whole when I was doing the hunter jumpers, for 9 years I did that, and I worked on a lot of horses, but it's because I hooked up with this guy. Well, I was inspired when I first when I was grooming by this old horse chiropractor from New Zealand who would come out from California and adjust horses, and he had used very long lever forceful techniques,
Mm.
but he got amazing results. But what really got me inspired is after he did an adjustment, he would step back to see what the horse had to say. And this is going somewhere back to what we're talking about. Hopefully, I won't forget it. But anyways, he I wanted to do what he was doing. But whenever he would came out to a show where he'd work on the horses in our barn, but then I would drive him around to the other barns and hold the lead rope for him. And I learned a lot just watching him. And he didn't share a lot. He was one of those old timers. But I learned a lot. Um, and I already forgot where we were going with this. Oh yeah, um, so when I started developing my own body work and working on horses while I was grooming, and then I eventually stopped grooming and I was just working on horses. Um, I met there was one guy, he was a vet tech for Dr. Steele, who was pretty well known on the East Coast. He was his vet tech for 20 years, and he was inspired by this New Zealand guy. So he started learning some body work. And at one point, he left the vet practice to do his own body work. And this is down in Wellington. That was the big place in the winter. There's like 5,000 horses there for 3 months. And he started doing body work, and he was swamped. Like because he knew he had 200 clients right off the bat because he'd been working with Dr. Steele. And I was down there trying to build my business. It's one horse at a time, and I'd get like 6 horses a week, and I'd be okay. I'm happy now. At least I can pay the campsite fee, and but then Bill Stanton was this guy's name, and he needed help, and so he asked me to work for him, and so I did, and so I went from working on like maybe 10 horses a week to 10 horses a day. Like we each did 50 or 60 horses a week. He knew all the trainers. He'd get a list of horses. We go down the aisle, work on these horses, and so it was a huge like education just working on that many horses every winter. And then the rest of the year, I'd go to other shows and work on some horses around here. But it was a huge education, but nobody was watching. The trainer gives you the list of horses, you go in the stall, you work on the horse. So there was no pressure like you're talking about.
Mm.
Uh, but then when I started teaching, then people are watching. And then, I had to get used to that. Like if I'm doing a demo at an expo, and people are watching, and there's like often when that guy's sitting at the bottom, lowest bench, way out on the edge, kind of on the side, just kind of,
Yeah.
and I'm doing my demo, and I always trying to keep it light because that's how I survive. But I'm always looking at this guy, and he's not getting this. He's not buying this at all, you know. And then a couple of times this happened, and it just surprised me. After it was over, this guy would come over and say, "Well, that was really interesting." And so that was like, "Oh, wow, maybe people aren't just judging you all the time,
Yeah, yeah.
negatively." That was always cool. But there's often that guy sitting, that's what he looks like.
Yeah, I think sometimes we assume our own fears on other people's facial expressions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
It's
Yeah,
really,
because I'm especially, yeah, what you just said. I'm trying to read the horse. I'm used to reading the horse. I can look at subtle changes
yeah,
in
yeah.
its face or its eyes or its ears, just his body. But people can't read them all the
Well,
time.
as a teacher, I've had to actually train myself not to have a resting face of like grumpy focus.
Hmm.
Because like when I ride, there are so many pictures of me riding with like a big scowl. And I'm like, I was having the time of my life. But
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
just that's just what my face does. And I don't want to scare my students or intimidate away somebody who wants to ask a question. And so
Mhm.
I've worked very hard over the last 5 years to make sure my face at neutral was not scary. So
Okay.
that people don't think I'm that guy, when I'm just
Yeah.
listening. It is
Uh,
very, very interesting to read.
that's the thing about photos, though. It just catches you in a moment. It
Yeah.
doesn't catch what you're doing really. And
Oh, there's
um,
so many bad photos of me on the internet, like just more than any person should ever see of themselves.
uh, that's awful. That's awful.
I'll do a clinic and somebody posts the worst photo of me and their horse, and they'll be like, "I had a great time with Amy Skinner." And I'm like, I have a gut sticking out, 900 chins, the horse's mouth is open. Like, I would love
Well,
to take that one down.
yeah, but once it's out there, it's out there. I
Yeah.
think Gerd Heuschman, there was, Gerd Heuschman, right?
Yeah.
He's that. I mean, he's really good. I mean, he's German, so you got to take him with a grain of salt. But um, I mean, his directness, but he really is there for the horse. But there was one photo of him on a horse just like bending and pulling, and it's all um overflexed and everything. And that one photo went around, and I think I mean, I like Germany. I like Germans. I
Yeah.
haven't spent a lot of time in Germany, but been there quite a few times to do horse stuff. And I think they have a great sense of humor. They're a lot of like Americans in some way in their sense of humor, but they're very direct, right?
Mhm.
And they just say it as they see it. But so that one photo of him got out, and it looked like he was torturing this horse, and I think it really, really bothered him. And I've only been with him a few times, but I think he said something once about, he just won't ride a horse now, in public because of this one photo. And in Germany, of course, they're all very opinionated, and so they're all trashing him because by the way he rides, and he's probably not a bad rider. He's
Yeah. I remember one time I had a student in a clinic whose horse was tearing the rein out of her hand and bolting and trying to buck her off. And so I got on the horse to help her. And the photo of me riding this horse with the horse's head straight up in the air and mouth open went around, and it looked like I was yanking his teeth out. And I was like, the horse had been ripping the rein, and all I did was ride him in some circles, but it was a bad looking photo. And that was the same thought I had. It's like, this is why we can't have nice things, you know?
Yeah, but that's part of the process. When you get on the horse,
Yeah.
that's part of getting him from where he is to where you want him. And
Yeah.
if people look at one photo and they make a judgment about it, I think they don't really understand that part of the process.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I mean, we could have a whole other conversation. Unfortunately, I have a load of hay that I have to go
Okay.
deliver, but the internet curation of beautiful, perfect photos has made people unaware of or squeamish of the pieces of the process. Like I accidentally overdid it with a horse, or oops, that was a little too much, or sometimes horses poke their noses out, or
Yeah.
that
And
kind of thing is just normal. I mean, not that you try to do it on purpose, but in your
mhm,
learning process, there will be some bumps.
yeah. And people see these perfect photos, and then if they're on their horse and it isn't that way, they think they're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily doing something wrong.
Yeah,
They
no,
might be doing something right.
that would be a really fun topic for another conversation.
Yeah. Well, this was fun. I could sit and talk all day, so it's good that
I
good
know,
that the hay arrived.
I know,
Yeah.
I can hear the tractor running out there, so I'm feeling like I'm going to get in trouble if I don't get out and go
Yeah.
check
Okay.
on this hay, but I've really enjoyed talking to you. It's a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, it's fun. Yeah. Thank you for asking me
Yeah, let's
to
do it again.
talk with you. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe
Good.
we'll hook up sometime. Hook up sometime in the. I know we've crossed paths in the past at the horse summit. I think
Yeah.
at first horse summit once, but that was my first. That was early on, and it was my first horse summit, and I was so focused on what I was doing to make sure I'm doing it right. I don't remember half the people that were there.
Yeah.
The only one there was some like I don't want to keep you from your hay, but Josh Nichols. I forgot he was there. I forgot I'd met him.
Yeah.
And then I met him again, and I realized why I'd met him. I think the only I remember Patrick King and Daniel Dolphin
Yeah.
because we went out drinking beer afterwards and
Of
had a good
course.
time. So the only two I remember that were there.
Well, I was there. I met you, and we had a good
Yeah,
time.
yeah. Oh, thank you for reminding me
Yeah,
because
you're welcome.
yeah. And then I think I saw you at the Western States Expo once. Were you out there?
I don't think so.
And,
I
oh,
hope
okay,
not.
wasn't
If
there?
I was,
Okay,
I wasn't remembering it. So,
okay. Well, okay. Anyways,
well,
I
I'd love
forgot
to
where we were going with
collaborate with
that.
you sometimes. We could put something together.
Okay.
It'd be a lot of fun.
Okay. All right. We'll keep that in mind, and then when all the stars align, and then it'll happen.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Enjoy
I'll
your
let
day,
you get.
Jim.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.